When a device's orientation changes, say from landscape to portrait or back again, this results in recreating the activity from scratch. This might not be immediately obvious. Looking at this emulator, I'll change its orientation by 90 degrees by pressing Ctrl F12. After a moment, the app adjusts, and notice that that text view laid itself out differently. It's stretched out. Now, it's possible that that could have happened just by adjusting the existing objects on the screen, but in fact, that activity was completely destroyed and then recreated from scratch. It's important to understand that this is happening. Most of the time, apps will adjust automatically and you don't need to do anything. But there are many situations where you need to choose a different layout or otherwise adjust. I'll show you that this recreation is happening by adding a little bit of code to the current project, orientation changes. I'll go to the main activity class and to the onCreate method, and I'll go down to the end of the onCreate method after the creation of the 3 event handlers for the 3 buttons, and I'll add a toast message. I'll type toast and press Ctrl space to add the import up at the top. Then I'll call the makeText method, pass in this as the context, and then a message of activity created. I'll set the duration to toast.lengthLong and show it. I'll save that change and run the app again. I'll start off at portrait, and as the app comes to the screen, I see the toast message appear. Now watch what happens when I change the orientation once again by pressing Ctrl F12. I see the toast message again, and when I change the orientation again, I see that message again, and so on. So that proves that this recreation is happening. But you can stop that process from happening and instead take control of the process of orientation change. There are 2 major steps. First, you have to tell the application through the manifest that you don't want the automatic recreation to happen, and then you need to add an event handler to your code to put your own custom code in place. I'll go back to Eclipse, and I'll go to the manifest file. This process is handled one activity at a time. For each activity that you want to manage explicitly, add an attribute to the activity tag. This will be an attribute in the beginning tag. The name of the attribute is config changes, because orientation is just one sort of configuration on the phone. Add the attribute and then press Ctrl space, and you'll see a list of all the different configuration changes you can deal with. You can work with what happens when the keyboard appears or is hidden. You can deal with screen layout, deal with the layout direction, the font scale, and others. To override the orientation change, you need to add 2 of these values. The first is orientation, but then add a pipe character, that's the vertical line that's on the same key as the backslash, and then press Ctrl space again, and also select screen size. Because when you change the orientation, the screen size changes too. It might have started off with a long vertical side, and now it has a long horizontal side, or vice versa. So by simply doing this, you're telling the app not to recreate the activity. I'll save that change, go back to my class, and rerun the application. When the app first appears, I see the toast message, but now when I change the orientation, I don't see that message, because again, it's not being recreated. So now I'll add my own custom code. I'll go down to the bottom of the class and place the cursor after the existing methods. And I'm going to override a method of the activity class called onConfigurationChanged. I'll type the beginning of the method name and press Ctrl space and choose that method from the list. The override annotation is added for me, and I'll get rid of the to-do comment, and then be sure to add any custom code after the call to the superclasses version of the method. I'll add an if statement. I'll add some conditional code, and I'll check the orientation using new config. That's a configuration object that's passed in as an argument. And I'll look at a property named orientation, and I'll compare it to a constant. These constants are members of the configuration class, so I'll choose that class and then look at the constant orientation_landscape. So if that expression is true, then I'll use another toast message. I'll select this toast message up here and copy and paste it into the conditional block. And I'll change the message to landscape. Then I'll add an else clause to the if statement, and I'll copy and paste that toast message again, and this time I'll output a message of portrait. I'll save my changes and run the app in the emulator again. As the activity first comes to the screen, I see the toast message. Now I'll change the orientation with Ctrl F12, and I see the landscape message, and I'll change the orientation again, this time to portrait, and I see the portrait message. So this is a place where you can put your custom code. Again, you have to override the default behavior that recreates the activity from scratch. You do that in the manifest, and then you override the onConfigurationChanged method for the current activity and add your custom code there.